kind of friendly with Ted Kennedy, you know, a big liberal. He says, we know who you are. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go to the White House. Spent the entire day there, met everybody, the vice president, didn't meet Reagan, but the vice president, the attorney general, the cabinet. But at the end of the day, Lee Atwater, the political director of the Ronald Reagan presidency, looks me in the eye and he says, all right, Professor Lichtman, this is why he really brought me there. He said, what would happen if Ronald Reagan did not run again in 1984? Very plausible, because Ronald Reagan was over 70 years old. Now, that doesn't necessarily stop you, but not unreasonable to think he might not run again. And I looked him back in the eye and I said, look what would happen. Look at your keys. Key number 3, incumbency. The incumbent party candidate is sitting president. If Ronald Reagan doesn't run again, you don't have a sitting president running. Key number 2, contest for the incumbent party nomination. You're going to have a huge contest if Ronald Reagan doesn't run again. Key 12, incumbent charisma. Ronald Reagan was a movie star, very charismatic, but they didn't have anyone else who was charismatic. So I looked Lee Atwater in the eye and I said, Mr. Atwater, if Ronald Reagan doesn't run, you go from 3 negative keys and a sure victory to 6 negative keys and a sure defeat. Lee Atwater looked me in the eye and said, thank you so much, Professor Lichtman, and the rest, of course, is history. Ronald Reagan didn't run and win a landslide in 1984. I published my first book on the keys back in 1990, and everyone was reading it in 1991. Does anyone know who was president in 1991? Father Bush, right, George H.W. Bush. And he had just fought the successful war in Kuwait. Saddam Hussein of Iraq had invaded Kuwait. George H.W. Bush put together this amazing coalition of nations all over the world and had a very successful war to throw Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. Get this. We have approval ratings, probably the same thing here, a poll, how many people approve of the president. After the Kuwait War, George H.W. Bush had 90% approval ratings, the highest in the history of the country. Higher than Franklin Roosevelt, higher than John F. Kennedy, higher than Ronald Reagan. No Democrat thought they could beat George H.W. Bush in 1992. But I wrote in my book that the Kuwait War just got him 1 key. I just have 1 key on successes in foreign policy. That's not really enough. If you look at the big picture, George H.W. Bush is going to be a 1-term president. He's going to lose in 1992. Did any of the Democratic big shots in the party, people like Al Gore, listen to me? Absolutely not. Why should they listen to a silly academic after all? They know best. But I did get another call. And it's a woman this time. And she says, Professor Lichtman, this is Kay Gus calling from Little Rock, Arkansas. I am the special assistant to Governor Bill Clinton. And she says, Professor Lichtman, are you serious that George Bush can be beaten in 1992? I said, yes, I am. I sent Bill Clinton a copy of my book and a memo. And once again, of course, the rest is history. Bill Clinton got an easy Democratic nomination because all the big shots sat out and beat George H.W. Bush in 1992 and became president of the United States. I also chatted with Barack Obama before the 2008 election, and I'm sure his chat with me made him much more relaxed about doing anything in 2008. Wrong, but who knows? I think he did, in fact, as you'll see, take into account the lessons of the keys, which is keep your eye on the big picture. The economy, foreign policy, scandals, social unrest, not on the little picture of speeches and ads and debates and campaign tricks. So, we are now going to become election predictors. We're going to use the keys to forecast the 2012 presidential election. And remember, 6 negative keys, 6 false answers to these 13 questions, and Barack Obama and the Democrats lose. Fewer than 6 negative answers to these keys, and Barack Obama and the Democrats win. You all ready? Let's go. Key number 1, the party mandate. In America, since we don't have a parliamentary system, we don't have no confidence in us. But we do have midterm elections. That is, our lower chamber, our Lok Sabha, is elected every 2 years, all from the entire country. So in between presidential elections, we have U.S. House elections. So I call that the party mandate, kind of a vote of confidence or no confidence, although it doesn't dissolve the government or anything like that. Does anybody know how well Barack Obama's Democrats did in the last midterm elections? Exactly. They got slaughtered. Terrible debacle for the Democrats. So key number 1 is false. Key number 2, there is no serious contest for the incumbent party nomination. Who is going to be the Democratic Party nominee? Barack Obama. Is he contested? No. Nobody is challenging Barack Obama within the Democratic Party. So key number 2 is true. Key number 3. Come on, that's an easy one. True or false? True. Barack Obama, say that fast 10 times, is the sitting president. So key number 3 is true. It's an advantage being the sitting president because of the way you command national attention. Key number 4, an interesting key. As I explained to you, America has a 2-party system. But from time to time, particularly in presidential elections, independent or third-party candidates rise up to challenge the party holding the White House. Is there any such third-party candidate this time that you've ever heard of? No. There's none. So key number 4 is true. All right, we now come to a little bit of a harder key. Key number 5, the short-term economy. The economy is not in recession during the election campaign. Is the American economy now in a recession? No. It's in a bad recovery, but unemployment has dropped from 10% to 8%. Jobs are being created every month. And the economy is growing, if growing slowly. So it's not a recovery that's as strong as we'd like, but it is a recovery, not a recession. And I don't think what's happening in Europe is going to plunge America into recession in just a few months left. American economy is too big to move that quickly. Key number 6, the long-term economy. Obviously, the long-term economy has not been doing very well. It's been a sluggish economy, so key number 6 is false. We now come to some of the more interesting keys. Requires a little bit of judgment. When I first came out with the keys, and anyone here a political scientist? Yeah. Political scientists didn't like this. You know why? They said it was subjective. I had to make certain judgments. And I kept telling them, political science is not physics. It deals with human beings. And you have to make judgments. There's got to be a little bit of art in your science. They didn't believe me. They kept beating me up until the early 21st century, about 20 years, anyway, 20 years after I developed the keys, the hottest thing in political science and forecasting was suddenly the idea that you had to include some judgment in your forecast. And you couldn't just have equations like in physics because those equations didn't work. All of a sudden, guess what? The hottest thing in political forecasting after 20 years in the wilderness was the keys to the White House. I twice addressed the International Forecasting Summit. I published in all the journals. I went to the convention of the American Political Science Association. I even went to the convention of the American Statistical Association. So the lesson, my friend, don't throw out any of your old clothes. You never know what might come back into style again. And the keys to the White House are in style. So a little bit of judgment is required here, but I don't think it's real hard. Key number 7, policy change. Has the Barack Obama, the Democrats, changed policy from George W. Bush, the Republicans? You think?
Yes.
Oh, yes. No question. And his big thing was the health care bill. He passed a big comprehensive, we don't have comprehensive health care coverage in America. He passed something the Democrats have been trying to do for 50 years, a big health care bill. You know how many Republicans in either chamber of our Congress voted for the Obama health care bill? It's a trick question. You know how many? 0. Not a single Republican. The first time in the history of the United States that such a big piece of social legislation was enacted without a single opposition vote. So certainly there have been big changes between Obama, the Democrat, and George W. Bush, the Republican. Key sustained social unrest. And I'm talking there about what was going on when I was growing up in the 1960s. Millions of people protesting the war in Vietnam in the streets, riots in the cities, the country coming apart. We've had some protests from the right. We had something called the Tea Party movement, you may have heard of it. From the left, Occupy Wall Street, but nothing that's threatened the society. So key number 8 is true. Key number 9, my favorite key, the scandal key. Does anybody remember the big scandal under President Bill Clinton? Monica Lewinsky. He was sleeping with this young intern, Monica Lewinsky. Or at least having some kind of sex with her. I don't know. It's a big point of debate, and I'm not going to go into it here. And people would say to me, Professor Lichtman, how could you have predicted Monica Lewinsky? And my answer was, no one in their right mind could have predicted Monica Lewinsky. And I don't think Bill Clinton's mind had very much to do with that particular scandal anyway. But it's in there. The scandal key is there. Anything like Monica Lewinsky or the Watergate scandal under Richard Nixon. No. Obama's been pretty squeaky clean. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the First Lady, Mrs. Obama, Michelle Obama. She is one tough-looking woman. I don't think Barack Obama would dare. All right, we now come to the foreign policy keys. And I have to tell you a sad little secret about the United States. It's hard for people to even understand it. But Americans pay no attention to foreign policy. We're very inwardly looking people. I suppose that's true of a lot of people. They look to their own lives first. And, we've always thought, we're the big, powerful country, and, what happens abroad, day to day, doesn't matter. Probably not 1 in 20 Americans could even tell you that Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, visited India recently. But the United States people do pay attention under 2 special circumstances, and that is reflected in these keys. They pay attention when there's a big disaster, right? It's like you don't pay attention to safety until you lose it. You don't pay attention to your fire alarm until your house burns down. So they pay attention to big failures like losing the war in Vietnam, or when George Bush, during the very beginning of the Iraq War, got on an aircraft carrier and said, mission accomplished, the war is over, and then thousands more Americans were killed, the war went on, it was terrible. Anything like that under Barack Obama. No, I mean, there's some unpopular policies, but not a big splashy failure, so key 10 is true. Key 11, the other time Americans pay attention is a big splashy success, winning a war, negotiating a big treaty like the nuclear test ban treaty I talked about. Now, until about a year ago, I had that key ranked as false. I didn't see a big, famous success for the Obama administration. But what happened almost exactly a year ago? Bin Laden. That was huge in the United States. And, personally, I don't like celebrating the killing of anyone, even someone as vile as Osama bin Laden, but it was huge in the United States. Big success. So key number 11 is now true. We're coming to the wind-up here. The last 2 keys, which are the only keys that have anything to do with the candidates, and the only key that has anything